indulgence, because this is the last motion in the approval process for PSS, and members are aware that this process has been very rigorous for many members who have spent a lot of time in committees. And as I hear somebody, the Honorable Pukosa say from behind me, that many members even had to travel from Sudan, from Juba, and abandon the Yala sports to come and complete the vetting process, Honorable Speaker. And there is also...
Honorable Carry, order. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the protection. And Honorable Speaker, members are also aware that the delay, because earlier on the Honorable Junet had said that, or the Honorable Pio and I had said that these PSAs were only vetted yesterday. But members are aware that their PSAs, almost 21 of them, who were 22 actually, who were vetted way before the petition that was filed before the High Court was filed. And Honorable Speaker, you know, following that petition and the striking out of that petition by the High Court, the petition that was filed by the Law Society of Kenya, this is when then we progressed yesterday for committees to sit the whole day, consider the vetting process, and table their reports. And Honorable Speaker, it's important to mention that the Law Society did submit a further memorandum to Parliament yesterday, and I must indicate, Honorable Speaker, that this memorandum from the Law Society of Kenya raised issues that the nomination of the 51 persons for appointments as principal secretaries, which the committees of this House has now completed vetting and whose approval has been exercised by plenary, did not meet certain constitutional requirements of regional balance, persons with disabilities, and gender balance, and those of the youth. And Honorable Speaker, it is important to note that the approval process and vetting hearings conducted by committees of this House, and indeed the House, are guided by both the Constitution and the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act of 2011. And indeed, Honorable Speaker, on gender balance, Article 27, Sub-Article 8 speaks on the question of gender, as Article 232 speaks to the issue of regional balance. Article 54, subsection 2 speaks to the issue of persons living with disabilities, and Article 55 speaks to the issue of representation of the youth and youth access to employment and their participation in political, social, and economic spheres of their lives in this country as citizens of this country. Honorable Speaker, allow me to note that each of the committees that have carried out this exercise of vetting undertook the vetting and approval hearings of the 51 persons nominated by the President for appointment as PSs or Principal Secretaries, as was required, making reference and being guided by the provisions I have just enumerated in the Constitution and the Public Appointments Act. Honorable Speaker, more critical is the provision of Section 7 of the Public Appointments Act, Parliamentary Approval, the Act of 2011, which defines the issues for consideration by a committee in conducting the approval hearings. Section 7A of this Act, Honorable Speaker, requires that each committee, and indeed this House, examines the procedure that was used to arrive at the 51 nominees. And this, Honorable Speaker, can only be answered by going back and checking on how the 51 nominees were interviewed, shortlisted, and eventually brought to this House. To this end, Honorable Speaker, I note that all the committees that vetted these principal secretaries and in their reports that have been tabled in this House did make reference to the report of the Public Service Commission in terms of Article 155, Sub-Article 3A of the Constitution. Honorable Speaker, indeed, if you take a quick look at all the reports that were submitted by by the departmental committees, they make reference to the report of the Public Service Commission. And a quick perusal of the report by the Public Service Commission, Honorable Speaker, members will observe, and indeed the country will observe and note, that this report went to great lengths to list in detail the names of the 51 nominees who are nominated as principal secretaries by their names. They have also listed the agenda their country of origin, their age, and whether the persons nominated are people living with or without disabilities. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, it is worth noting that Section 47(3) of the Public Service Commission Act of 2017 also obligated the Public Service Commission in making recommendations for persons to be nominated by the President for appointment as principal secretaries to pay attention to inclusiveness in terms of gender, Kenya's diverse communities, persons living with disabilities, and the youth. Honorable Speaker, from the report of the Public Service Commission, which, as I indicated, all the committees of this House referred to as evidence in their reports, it is clear that the process of shortlisting and interviewing the 51 persons adhered to the provisions, to the provisions of the Constitution on, among other things, gender, merit, youth, persons with disabilities, and the ethnic and regional diversity of our country. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, allow me to conclude by saying that the memorandum by the Law Society of Kenya that was brought to their House was indeed forwarded to all the departmental committees that were conducting the vetting hearings for consideration. To this end, I am very glad, Honorable Speaker, that the reports of the committees have analyzed all the ensuing constitutional issues relating to gender, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic and regional diversity, and therefore, Honorable Speaker, and all committees found that the nominees complied with these constitutional and statutory requirements of our Constitution. And Honorable Speaker, let me also take this opportunity in a special way to thank all the chairs of our committees and indeed all members who took a lot of their time to participate in the vetting process and ensure that this process was successfully completed in record time, and also for availing themselves and sacrificing to be here till late, Honorable Speaker, for this approval. As I also congratulate all the nominees on their approval today as principal secretaries, but also to inform them that they now take office when they are sworn in as accounting officers in ministries of government, and they must be accountable to the people of Kenya and accountable to this House. The principal secretary is nominated once approved, Honorable Speaker, and sworn in, must therefore exercise their office and duties in their offices, bearing in mind that they are now public officers who must serve in line with this Constitution, in line with our statutes, and paying due diligence to the prudent management and use of public funds. And I wish to congratulate them, and especially, Honorable Speaker, noting that a number of my classmates, one, Veronica Nduva, who was my classmate at the University of Nairobi, is now, has now been approved, and my other classmate, the PS nominee for housing, the Honorable Charles Hinga, as PS in the Ministry of Housing, Honorable Speaker, and also the regional manager, Kera, in Kiambu County, who is now the principal secretary nominee for roads. Honorable Speaker, I especially congratulate them. With that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to submit and support